They're enacting a process called shadow banning, and what everyone needs to understand is most major platforms that include Meta's platforms of Facebook and Instagram, but also platforms like TikTok and indeed X, all use algorithms to recommend certain kinds of content to the users of those platforms. But those recommendation algorithms can be modified, shaped and changed by those platforms. And this process of shadow banning is when, say, legitimate pages or individuals find that their content isn't actually making its way into the hands of ordinary users, or is in fact de-indexed from the platform, so is unfindable or unlocatable on the platform. And there's a big concern at the moment in America, indeed around the world, because these platforms are indeed, of course, international platforms, that we're going to be seeing more cases of these forms of shadow banning over content which is legitimate content, but perhaps goes against the political beliefs and ideals of the Trump administration.
So what are some of the issues and areas being targeted at the moment?
So this case, for example, in kind of the provision of abortion advice is one, but there's a long history of shadow banning and restrictions on forms of sexual positive content, going back many decades, in fact. But we may see other forms of content. We've already been seeing, say, pro-Palestine content be shadow banned over the last year, and we may see now other kind of regime critical content begin to be shadow banned or deranked on those platforms. I'll say as well, it's not just the banning of content. We've already seen evidence and study conducted by one of my colleagues, Tim Graham, shows that Elon Musk has been artificially inflating his own content on his own platform of X. And so it kind of goes two ways, both the de-amplification of certain content and amplification of, say, pro-Trump content on those platforms. And
so how does this align with statements from some of the major players about commitments to freedom of speech?
Well, look, it reveals the duplicity of those statements, that those people in charge that claim to be the free speech absolutists or free speech warriors are nothing of the sort. They, in fact, are very much about protecting their own speech and the speech of those that are sympathetic to their views, and deplatforming those that would be critical of them and critical of their political allies.
So what concerns do you have about where this is headed?
Look, I have huge concerns because these platforms are, of course, used extensively in Australia. We have a federal election this year as well. And there are big questions about what kinds of content is making its way into the hands of users, and indeed how bad actors can use those to amplify their particular messaging. And the general opaqueness, which has never really been addressed in terms of allowing us as a research community, indeed all of us as a general public, to be able to see what is happening inside these platforms. We're not going to see any move towards transparency over the term of Trump's administration, and that should be of grave concern for all of us.
In light of this, are people migrating to other platforms that they're more comfortable with?
Look, we have seen interest in a lot of other platforms. That coincides, of course, also with the recent TikTok momentary ban in the United States. And of course, people are curious about alternatives to this to be able to get news and make sure they're kind of being informed away from these forms of moderation of content, which, as I said, is very much evidence-led and evidence-based, but goes against the particular administration at the time in the US.
Okay, Dan Angus, thanks so much for talking to us from Brisbane.
Thank you.